Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our last meeting for the UK International Coronavirus Network. Normally, I managed to persuade Paul Diggard to do this, but he's absolutely insisted that I do it for once in this network. So first of all, I'd really like to start off by thanking the teams from BBSRC and DEFRA. So that's Tom, Sedana, Nikki, Ella, and Marimon. I don't know where you are in the audience. Hello, guys. Because it was about 4 years ago, not quite today, but 4 years ago, that they let us know that the network had been funded. And we started discussions with them and the other co-directors on what shape the network should be, what their vision was for it, and what our vision was for it. And I think also to remember 4 years ago that we were still in the midst of the pandemic. There was no vaccine. And certainly in the UK, we'd come out of our first lockdown and were partying. And of course, cases started to go back up again. And then we had to think about the network virtually for a while before the magic vaccine came along in the following year. But it's amazing how the world changed in that pandemic time to getting that vaccine, to here we all are again in a non-air conditioned, non-ventilated room with no face masks, quite happily sat next to each other without anyone coughing or spluttering and people moving away from them like they had leprosy, like it was during the pandemic. At least that was my experience of it. If you're in a crowd or a queue or a line if you're from the States and you wanted people to move away from you, the easiest thing to do was start coughing. And people just moved away very, very quickly. The second group of people I'd like to acknowledge is Jill and Lisa. Where are you, Jill and Lisa? There you are. Who've basically been running and administering the network for myself and the co-directors and doing an absolutely fantastic job on it and reminding us on what we should do and when we should do it. I think the network has delivered a number of things, and Paul, Dallin, Lorraine, please chip in if I forget to say things at this point. But part of the network was obviously bringing people together. We have done that in the form of these meetings. I think the ECRs have done a really great job in bringing themselves together, forming their own ECR events and forming their own networks that will do them very well for the decades to come. I remember roughly being that age, and at least us in the UK as virologists, forming our own virology network. Paul will remember at the back there, and Nikki, that we were all of a certain young age thinking, what do we do? How do we write grants? How do we develop the networks that these older people have? And we formed our own society and got on with things, and that's exactly what the ECRs have been able to do, and it's so great to see that in the next generation. I'd particularly like to thank Dallin and colleagues for working with Star IDAS, delivering one of the roadmaps for animal research on animal coronaviruses. And I think one of the things that we were very conscious of in the network 4 years ago is that we did an awful lot on SARS-CoV-2 for very, very obvious reasons. But it was also to remember that coronaviruses had been around before SARS-CoV-2 came along. There was this thing called MERS coronavirus, and Walid in the back there hosted a meeting in Saudi Arabia on MERS coronavirus for the network. But of course, everyone forgot about MERS, and then there was SARS-1 20 years ago, and everyone had forgotten about SARS-1. And so the network has been able to remind people that there are coronaviruses other than SARS-2 and that we shouldn't forget them, and we should also work on them because they do cause significant animal disease. That's why most of us got started on coronaviruses in the first place. But also then that there are these other human diseases and they do have the potential to re-emerge again as disease X. Certainly that's what we're putting on our funding applications anyway. So I think that was a really important thing to do. And one of the other things we were able to achieve as the network is to provide prime funding from Rosalind Institute and Pirbright Institute for ECRs under the auspices of BBSRC to pump prime some research projects to help ECRs develop some research ideas to enable them to start developing their own funding mechanisms. And I think the network has allowed us to, a point Dallin made to me just now, sustain the network within the UK once the flurry of SARS-CoV-2 funding is finished. So that's been a really great thing to do and allow us to carry on meeting each other and writing grant applications from that. But also particularly, the clue is in the name of the network, it's international. I mentioned we've managed to link out with colleagues from Saudi Arabia, but also we had a big regional meeting in India. We've got colleagues over from Canada, and particularly it's allowed us to reintegrate with the EU after the B word. And I think that's been really important for us in the UK to be able to reform those networks with people from Europe. That has enabled us then to think of things like Horizon Europe funding again. So I think those are all the things I'd like to say.